Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and I'm joined today by my co-host Brendan Miller. Brendan, good to have you back. I love hosting the show with you, man.
Yeah, I mean, what a perfect time to come on. Cubs are the best team in baseball by record. 20 games over 500. PCA's hitting a home run every other day. Matt Shaw hit a home run, his first, I believe, at Wrigley Field. Perfect time to come on.
Yeah, it's well, and also it's fun because it's like, yeah, you get Matt Shaw at the majors, you got PCA at the majors, you got a whole lot of homegrown talent there, a whole lot of guys coming up through the farm system. I've had you on a few different times, and like when I've had you on, sometimes it's been to talk about like the kind of transition between AAA and the majors and the prospects and the prospects that are still the majors. Sometimes I've had you on to just kind of talk about prospects strictly and prospects only. But today I just recently released my top 30 prospects in the Cubs organization. And I kind of prefaced it when I wrote the article. I wrote it and dropped it at the old blog over at Out of the Vines, since there's no Northside Bound anymore to
Yeah.
drop it there, but RIP. But when I was sitting down and writing about it, I was like, I haven't written anything the entire season long. I hadn't written anything since the last thing I wrote was when I wrote like the goodbye article at Northside Bound. And so it felt kind of weird writing, but I was sitting there and I was like, man, like I'm still digging into the prospects as much as I ever have hosting this show. I'm still watching a lot of the games. I'm still digging into the stats pretty hard. I'm still very aware of what's going on with all these prospects clearly. And I went back and looked and I haven't missed a mid-season prospect rankings update in like almost a decade at this point,
Yeah.
which is kind of crazy.
No, it's nuts. I mean, Corey and I were having this discussion too. Like, we have not missed a weekly episode in 10
It's
years.
crazy, dude.
And it's like, how nuts and how psychotic truly are we doing this stuff?
Yeah, we're kind of crazy people, but
A little
that's
bit.
okay. So I was like, let me go ahead and just drop the update. And I think that right now is especially a good time to drop this update, right? So like last week we had the episode where we recapped all of the Cubs draft picks. Me,
Yeah.
Zumac, and Brian went through all 20 draft picks, and always one of our favorite episodes of the season. We're gonna have next week will probably be a recap. I guess timing wise, we'll probably end up dropping an episode a couple days late so that we can do a recap of the trade deadline and what prospects ended up going away from the Cubs there. And so this is kind of a weird like sweet spot of the season where we can sit down and kind of rehash the top prospect rankings because it becomes important, right? When the Cubs trade away Owen Caissie or Jackson Wiggins or Jonathan Long or whoever it might be, like we need to know where these guys actually rank in the system because there's a lot that can happen between the offseason rankings updates and the midseason rankings updates, right? Like I have Jonathan Long at 6 now. I think
Yeah.
preseason I had him down at like 11 or 14. Like I had him down pretty far. So like there's a big difference between trading your 6th best prospect and your 14th best prospect. And so I thought this was a good time to dig into this. I brought you on because honestly, like with prospect rankings, especially, like you are in tune with prospects more than most people. But
Am
um,
I a prospects guy? And do I
you're
get that? Do I get that honor?
I think you get that honor, but I think it's
Wow.
cool because like I think you are not into the weeds as much as we are, obviously. So I think that like you kind of play that middle ground where like I drop a prospect rankings and you can kind of a lot of especially for top 30 rankings, a lot of people look at these that aren't in tune at all with Cubs prospects.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of play that middle ground a little bit and
Yeah.
I'll have you ask questions along the way. I'll kind of give some descriptions on some of these guys. So we won't want to run too long. I know that this is with me and Brendan, especially, we can run super long. I got a
Listen,
baby
I got all
downstairs, so I
day.
can't go too long.
You got more responsibilities than me. I'll sit here until the Cubs game starts. I don't
Dude,
care.
I think that my by far like I can go get to talk with Brian and Zumac and we can do some long episodes. I think you
Yeah.
and me by far do our longest episodes I've ever done on this show. So we're gonna try to keep it at a reasonable time frame here. But basically, what we're gonna do, guys, is I'm gonna pop up on the screen if you guys are watching on YouTube. If not, if you're just listening on podcast forms, perfectly fine. I'm gonna run through. I've got 4 different tiers of my top 30 rankings and we'll run through tier by tier, run through the names. I'll give a few highlights on some players here and there. I'll open it up to Brendan for any questions that you might have,
Mhm.
and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah.
Anything else for me to hit on before we start digging in, Brendan?
No, I mean, I think like just a general bird's eye view. I've been encouraged with Jefferson Rojas's recent promotion. Owen Caissie has been hitting home runs. It feels like every other day. And then it is coinciding with a lot of the trade talk now ramping up, being 10 days removed from the deadline and having guys like Eugenio Suarez come up, and what does the package look for that? So everything is like a perfect culmination, as you pointed out, of the rankings and the trade deadline and the draft and the graduations with PCA and Shaw and Horton. It's like the perfect time to actually talk about this.
Yeah, let's go ahead and because those top guys are going to be the guys that are talked about most in terms of some of these trades at the trade deadline, especially for top of the rotation starters, especially for guys like Eugenio Suarez. Sorry, I'm not as good as Pat Hughes, but guys like that. It's these top five
No one
guys.
is.
So my first tier, how I've defined these tiers, I know a lot of guys define tiers as it's like the future value, like a 60 future value guy, a 50 future value guy, a 45 future value guy. I try to break this down, and in the article, which I'll share the link in the episode description below. But I've tried to put it into normal people language as much as possible, because that's how I operate with these lists. So this first tier of top 5 guys are, in my opinion, head and shoulders above the rest on this list. So I've defined this first tier as successful development means they are everyday Major League Baseball players. So at 1, I've got Owen Caissie. At 2 is Moises Ballesteros. At 3 is Jefferson Rojas. 4 is Jackson Wiggins. And 5 is Kevin Alcantara. Those are the names we're used to seeing. We've seen these names for quite some time now. They're the most talked about guys in the organization. I was on this show probably 3-4 weeks ago, and Brian put me on the spot, and I ranked Moises Ballesteros as my first prospect in the organization, as my number 1 guy. And it felt weird. It felt weird ranking a guy that I view as a first baseman or DH type as the number 1 guy in the organization. But since then, Moises hasn't done anything wrong. Owen Caissie is the guy that's kind of stepped up, and over the last month and a half or so, he's been a man possessed at the plate. And so because of that, because he was already number 2 in my eyes, and because of that super hot streak, he's number 1 now for me, is Owen Caissie. And so those guys very interchangeable up top at 1 and 2. And then honestly, after that, Jefferson Rojas and Jackson Wiggins, I would listen to any argument that you have for both Jefferson Rojas and Jackson Wiggins being the number 1 prospect in the Cubs organization. I think that those 4 guys are all top 60 prospects in my eyes in all of Major League Baseball. And then Kevin Alcantara, I still view as a top 100 prospect in all of baseball. And so that's kind of what defines these top 5, are just these are some of the best in all of baseball.
The pushback for anyone who's into Owen Caissie is going to be the whiffs and the strikeouts. We all see the power. We all see the defense and the athleticism as well, and especially the age, which I feel sometimes as an outsider talking about these prospects, Owen Caissie's age gets dampened. He's only 22 years old. So for me, I value age like you and your BASH statistic. I value age really highly. If you're performing above your age category with an elite skill, then I notch you up a few levels. So I have to remind myself that Owen Caissie's age is a huge component of this. But the pushback is those whiffs. He has right now a 29% whiff rate. The major league average, just to scale this appropriately, is about 23%. So he's 6 percentage points worse than the current major league scale. So my question is, okay, well, if he gets called up, let's say in September, or if he gets called up and goes through that Matt Shaw development timeline in 2026, what is my realistic expectations that he just won't whiff like crazy at the big league level? And if there is some potential growing pains, does his timeline coincide with the Cubs' current competitive window? Right? That's how I kind of view Owen Caissie. And I feel like despite him being number 1, there is an argument that it's not going to line up for Owen and this current Cubs era.
Is it better or worse, or it just depends on the player, that Owen Caissie now he's not chasing. He's still whiffing. And so we know that he's swinging and missing at a lot more pitches in the zone, rather than a guy like Kevin Alcantara is swinging and missing because he's chasing sliders out of the zone.
Yeah.
What's better, I guess? Is there a better?
I mean, if you're making contact on damaged pitches,
Mm-hmm.
middle end pitches, your zone contact is okay and you're just whiffing a lot, then I would probably highlight that as better. Like if you show me the capacity to hit hittable pitches with frequency, then I'll go through the growing pains with you on your approach. To me, that becomes a volume thing. But if you're missing on pitches that are hittable, damageable pitches, then to me it signals there's something fundamentally not flawed. That's a harsh way of saying it, but there's fundamentally something that needs to be changed mechanically, right? So I don't know exactly how Owen Caissie is whiffing. I know you've talked about Kevin Alcantara not being able to hit sliders and chasing a lot, but for Owen Caissie, I haven't watched him enough to really understand why he's whiffing that much. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
from your eyes, is it more so just like swinging through fastballs middle in, or is it just is he diving too much? Let's say on changeups away, or what is it from your eyes?
Yeah. So prior to this season, a lot of what stood out to me, and this is not statistically driven. This is just like by watching him. What stood out to me prior to this season was him swinging and missing on a lot of changeups from right-handed pitchers,
Okay.
both changeups in the zone and changeups that were diving down underneath the zone and into the dirt. That was something that stood out really bad to me. Now, I think he's done a much better job of making contact on changeups this season compared to last. I think that right now it might be a little bit of lefty fastballs that are standing out to me a little bit. But again, I don't have the stats pulled up to justify that. That's just something that's caught my eye a little bit. But um, really, it's what stands out is like it's that chasing and whiffing,
Yeah.
not in zone whiffing. When you're like really watching a player, like you notice it way more with Kevin Alcantara because you're like, oh, like he shouldn't have swung at that, but he did and he missed. Versus Owen Caissie, who is not necessarily chasing, he's drawing walks, he's not chasing pitches out of the zone. It becomes harder for like me to put on my scouts hat and identify that problem because it doesn't look as gross. You know, it doesn't look as like as bad when you're swinging and missing at pitches in the zone, especially when you know that Owen Caissie is doing a lot of damage to pitches in the zone as well. Like in terms of how hard he's hitting them and the slug that comes with when he makes contact with those balls in the zone.
Yeah. I mean, when Alcantara got called up last year, that was one thing I noticed. Like, can he be selective? And is he
Mm-hmm,
going
mm-hmm.
to chase too much with that whiff profile being still at that stage too much? With Owen, I do feel like it's different. I've watched a few of the Iowa games. I've seen him in spring, and I feel like he has a better feel for it. But there's also, for me, there's the question of, is the power going to be enough in the first year or 2 years to justify
Mm,
keeping them in the system? And I do feel like,
yeah.
we all talk about, uh or is there an outfield log jam? Do we have this and this? And sometimes I do feel like that gets overblown, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, I do feel like that is a justifiable conversation when you do have potentially a Kyle Tucker extension being
Yeah.
negotiated. You do have Seiya Suzuki on a 1 year remaining contract. And then the question is, well, how do you keep those guys playing in 2026 while also growing someone like Owen Caissie's development? And you saw what the Dodgers did recently. They had a quote unquote logjam, right, at first base, and they traded Michael Bush for Zahir Hope and Jackson Ferris and replenished their lower level system that way. I'm not saying this is like, one on one per se, but I
Mm-hmm.
do feel like when we talk about these prospects, it's not, for me, the way I view it, it's not like, okay, are they finished products now? It's how long will it take for them to reach their optimal self? PCA's ahead of schedule, right?
Mm-hmm.
Matt Shaw, I think he's on schedule. I think he's going through these growing pains at an expected pace, right? But it lines up with Matt Shaw and the current Cubs team right now where they're able to do that. With Owen
Yeah.
Caissie, the question I have is, well, how long will it take for him to reach that optimal value point?
Yeah, and that it helps with a guy like Matt Shaw right now that the rest of the team surrounding him has been absolutely terrific. So the Cubs can
Right.
afford, and there's still a lot of calls from fans of like, oh, like let's replace Matt Shaw, replace Matt Shaw. We're talking about getting a third baseman at the deadline, like that makes sense. But like you can still afford to have Matt Shaw struggle for this first half of the season, first half plus, because everybody around him has been so damn good, and so like
Yeah.
you can adjust for those growing pains. Same with PCA, even a year prior. And so hopefully that'll be the case with Owen Caissie when he comes up. Maybe it's with Chicago, maybe it's elsewhere, but like that he's given that runway to continue to improve and make adjustments and get better every single day over the course of that first year. So
I mean, it feels like Kevin Alcantara would be the one in trade talks. If there's a huge upgrade to be made, he would be the one the Cubs would want to. I mean, it's kind of obvious, I guess, saying this, but he would be the one the Cubs would prefer to move on from rather than Owen Caissie, just given some of the like extreme traits that Owen shows and maybe the less susceptible to chase and whiffs from his approach.
I want to hit on Jackson Wiggins here, who I have ranked fourth, because I think that we've talked about him plenty, so I don't want to dig in too deep into what makes Jackson Wiggins so good. We did see Jackson Wiggins throw on Saturday. He pitched for the first time in a little over a month, as I think what the schedule was. He ended up going 2 innings, looked strong in terms of 97 to 99 mile an hour fastball. The slider was 89 to 92. The Birmingham camera was truly awful, so we couldn't get a whole lot of good angles of him and the way the stuff was moving, but ended up striking out 5 guys so in his 2 innings of work. So strong outing from Jackson Wiggins. Good to see him back. But I think it's important to point out Jackson Wiggins that he is the exact situation that the Cubs need to see continue over the next few years, right? The Cubs lost Cade Horton. They graduated Cade Horton, graduated Matt Shaw, and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, yeah, Owen Caissie and Moises Ballesteros are still hanging around, and Jefferson Rojas is still around. But now you're losing those top end, top 100 type prospects in the organization. You got to replace them somehow. You're not going to replace them by adding 5 guys into the top 100. But if you can take Jackson Wiggins, who last year was exciting, but not a top 5 prospect in the Cubs organization. If you can turn a guy like that into a top 60 prospect in all of baseball, like that's exactly what you're looking for from this organization over the next few years.
Yeah, with Jackson too. I mean, the fastball looks major league caliber. The secondaries look major league caliber. You talked about the changeup maybe not being ironed out. The changeup from a stuff perspective looks like it can be major league caliber. So to me, he's on that trajectory where he could very well be a starting pitcher for any organization. The timeline of that happening with pitchers, you just don't know. I would not be surprised if he logs major league innings as soon as next year, like earlier on, especially with the way the Cubs are maybe changing some of their philosophy and promoting guys and strength and conditioning and innings limits and all that. So to me, Jackson Wiggins is a notch below how we viewed Cade Horton, which is significant. I think Jackson Wiggins is one of the better Cubs pitching prospects we've had in addition to Cade Horton in a long time. His stuff compares, you and I talked about this, I think last year. If you look at his fastball shape, it looks very much like, and maybe it's a bad thing to say now, but like a Bobby Miller type fastball shape. A lot of carry, a lot of movement on it. I think that bodes well for a changeup. And I think his secondary horizontal pitch, his breaking pitch looks really good too. So I'm excited about Jackson Wiggins. At the same time, could they move on from him at the trade deadline? Yeah, of course. I mean, guys with his profile are volatile, but I would not be surprised to see Jackson Wiggins get significant innings as soon as next year.
Yeah, let's address that real quick. I know that you and Corey addressed it on the CHGO Cubs related podcast on this past week, and I could not agree more. Like there are no untouchable prospects. Like
Yeah.
nobody is untouchable, and I've seen that thrown out a whole lot more recently with a lot of people in my replies. A lot of people just every time I say that, oh, Owen Caissie homered again, or Jackson Wiggins is back throwing
He'll be
99.
gone
Like
in 2 weeks.
yeah, like he'll be gone in 2. I see both ends of the spectrum, right? Like he's gone, no chance he's sticking around. He's gone. I also see he cannot possibly be traded. Like we
Yeah.
cannot. He's untouchable. We cannot trade him. And recently, I've been responding to people, and like I get it. Like I get the people's excitement. I have excitement about all these guys too. Like I love watching these players play for the Cubs organization. But I've been responding like you wouldn't trade Jackson Wiggins for anybody in baseball. Because if the answer to that is yes, you would not trade him for anybody, then yeah, I guess he's untouchable in that situation. But like there are plenty of guys, plenty of packages that you would include Jackson Wiggins or Owen Caissie or the combination of both of them
Yeah.
for certain packages in Major League Baseball. And so like I think it's worth pointing out like none of these guys are untouchable. As exciting as Jackson Wiggins is, like he's super exciting. I think that he can be an ace for a Major League Baseball team. He also could not be, right? Like he also could be a reliever. He also could be a middle reliever in the majors or whatever it may be, you know. So like I believe in Jackson Wiggins. I think he's terrific. But him, just like Owen Caissie and Moises Ballesteros and all these dudes, like they have their flaws. There's a reason why it would make sense to include them in certain packages, and it's also there's a reasons why you should not include them in certain packages at the trade deadline. You know.
When you saw Cade Horton have his success so far with the Cubs, did the way he had success surprise you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's well, I think the one thing that stands out the most is the changeup. Like we saw a good changeup in the minors, but like the fact that he is using it as much as he is to lefty hitters
20% of the time.
a lot. Like
A
that was
lot.
not something that I noticed from him in the minors. And so like that's another thing, right? Is it like with Cade Horton or any especially any pitcher that there is a completely different version of the major league pitcher than the minor league version of the pitcher because you have more advanced scouting reports, you have different sequencing that the Cubs major league pitching coaching staff likes to use. They pick up on new pitches constantly. Like that happens all the time. And so like yeah, the Cade Horton that was in the minors is not the Cade Horton that's in the majors. And the same is going to be the case for Jackson Wiggins. The same is going to be the case for my 30th ranked prospect, Ethan
Right.
Flanagan, right? Like pitchers change so damn much. And so like, yeah, man, it's all intertwined. It's all like what's so important to me is like self scouting. Like I think the Cubs need to
For
be
sure.
able to scout and understand what they have with their own prospects. That is like so incredibly important. That is the most important thing at the trade deadline when you're a buyer.
Well, that's what I was about to say is how do we like we look at these numbers. We go to Baseball Savant, we go to Fangraphs, we read your posts, we listen to you and Zumac and Smith. There's some, not some, there's a huge unknown that we just can't see, but the Cubs may see. I look at Cade Horton. I'm surprised that he's having success the way he's having success. The changeup he talked about 20% of the time. The the constant attacking of the
Mhm.
zone is something I did not expect. I was not watching Cade like you guys were as he was coming up through the system, but I watched Cade. His misses are still in the zone. So I thought, okay, well, if he's going to be this, cut fastball guy with a slider and sweeper, then he's probably going to walk guys. That's how I kind of envisioned it. I don't know if that was right or not, but I'm watching him. Okay, well, he's missing fastball lower in his zone, but he's still getting weak contact. It reminds me of how certain guys in the past have had success.
It reminds me of a much more scaled down version of Daniel Palencia, where like Cade
Mm,
Horton is trusting his stuff enough. Because I
right.
would my concern, my biggest concern with Cade Horton when he came up to the majors was that he was going to try to nibble too much
Okay.
with different pitches. Like he wasn't going to trust his stuff to live in the zone, and that has obviously not been the case, right? Like I love that whatever the coaching staff in Chicago is telling these pitchers, it's the case with Palencia and Cade Horton and all the starting pitchers. They're throwing a lot of strikes,
Well,
a
even
lot of first pitch strikes, a lot of strikes. Brad Keller's been that way. All these like Chris Flight, like all these dudes have been throwing so many strikes, and it's just been the case of somehow the coaching staff convincing these players that they do have good enough stuff to live in the zone and get outs.
even Porter Hodge last
Yeah.
year,
Yep.
right, gets called up. His walk rate gets cut down by 50%. I don't think anyone expected that,
Yeah.
right? So it goes back to your point, just to bring it back with Jackson Wiggins and the trade discussion. It can go in both directions, where all of a sudden Jackson Wiggins, something clicks and his process gets accelerated and the value becomes faster and bigger than you expected, but you don't know. But the hope is like that type of representation of where the Cubs can make that happen for Jackson Wiggins, well, then it can be applied to the guys you have in your tier 2 list, in your
Yeah.
tier 3 list. And really that's the crux of a healthy system.
I completely agree with that. But before we get into the second tier, I know you want to talk Jefferson Rojas.
Oh
What you
yeah.
got on him?
Uh, I was reading your post. You mentioned there's not one like elite skill that pops up, and I don't interpret that as a bad way. I interpret that as maybe even an encouraging thing because he does
Mhm.
everything, at least from like the stat line, very well. So he's 20 years old. He'll be in AA. He does not strike out that much. He's hitting for respectable power at his age. He's gone through adjustments so far at his young age. But for me, I value young guys who balance contact
Mhm.
and power and playing above their competition. So it's not like, a 1 versus 1, but it reminds me of the discussion we had with Isaac Paredes a long time ago. This is like 2017, 2018. And we're looking at this. And I remember there was a Fangraphs projection system. I don't even know if they still do it, but it was called, I think, Cato.
Okay.
Remember Cato? Do they even still use
I do like I remember Kate. I don't know that they still use that though.
Okay, it's similar probably to how like Bash is
Yeah.
is done because they value like age, or they did at the
Yeah.
time. They value age very highly in contact rate, and so one of the most predictable traits, and this is all not a great system, but one of the most predictable traits was just contact rate at a young age. And I look at Jefferson Rojas the same way that Isaac Paredes was just making tons of contact and
Hmm.
still slugging the ball at a very, very young age. And to me, that signals, okay, there's something there fundamentally that as he continues to get bigger and stronger and more mature, that those fundamental traits will allow him to have success.
Hmm. Yeah, man. That's a good point with Rojas and the kind of the Paredes comp. I look at Jefferson Rojas and obviously the way in which the Cubs decide on who to sign out of the international free agent market versus the guys they draft. Like those are two completely different strategies because you're dealing with guys at completely different ages and playing styles and things like that, right? Jefferson Rojas is we just got done last episode talking about the draft and talking about the model that the Cubs use and how really what a lot of things that guide that model is guys, are you swinging at strikes, and when you do swing at strikes, are you making hard contact?
Okay.
And Jefferson Rojas fits that model, that strategy to a T. If he was a draft eligible guy, which he still wouldn't be this year because he just turned 20.
Nuts.
I think like age wise, he would probably be draft eligible next year, which is
Yeah.
crazy. Which would like he'd be a top 10, top 20 pick and like top 10 pick probably, right?
Yeah.
Um, so he just fits that model super well. Like you said, I mentioned in the write up of him that he just does everything well. For him to be the number one prospect in this organization, like there's an argument for it right now. I
What's the
just look.
argument of him? What's rather the argument of Casey over Rojas?
My argument there is that major league players, almost all of them, have one very good trait. Like on the scouting, on like the power hit contact or the power contact speed fielding arm. They almost all major league players have one that is like really good. At least when you're in the minors, right? Like they have one
Yeah.
really good trait. And I think Rojas is almost there. The contact ability is what draws my eye to Jefferson Rojas the most. But with Owen Caissie, I can point to him and be like, he hits the ball really, really hard. And the power is starting to display itself in games right now. Like there is a major
Okay.
league talent right there. And with Rojas, I think that the contact, like I said, is probably closest. The power's coming around. I think the power is, I'm optimistic about that. The fielding, like I think he can play shortstop right now. I don't know if in the majors he's a shortstop, but that's fine. I think he can stay on the dirt. I think he can be a second baseman or a third baseman. The speed is good. The speed is pretty good. He's swiping quite a few bags. So if I'd say if the power maybe displayed itself a little bit more or the contact was like truly elite,
Right.
then like that's what would put him there number one for me.
I'm watching the draft. I don't know if you guys like use this stuff, but they have all these different swing breakdowns. I'm
Okay,
looking
yeah.
at
Oh yeah.
like pelvis like acceleration. I'm like, what the hell is all of this? And it's pretty cool. But I wonder, have you guys started to consider some of that? Like I was watching, the top 10, prep shortstops and all their numbers and how they compare to major league average. I'm like, geez, man, these high schoolers are killing it. And I wonder, that rate for Jefferson Rojas, how does that look
Hmm.
for Owen Caissie and everything? And I wonder, to some respect, I love the eye test. Like I'm still a big eye test guy,
Oh
despite
yeah.
sometimes we talk about the numbers, but I do wonder how wrong I am when I look at Owen Caissie and I'm not saying this is the case, but just use that as an example, and how that correlates to some of those underlying metrics. And someone like Rojas, I would be curious. I'm like, all right, well, we're not talking about an elite skill like you are discussing right here, but like, what does some of like the athletic numbers look like? Are we maybe undervaluing him in that respect?
That's a good point. I mean, that's where those like underlying like body movement type numbers
And I'm
probably
sure the Cubs have
typically,
that.
yeah, oh for sure. And I
Yeah.
think that's where that typically does match up with the eye test, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm looking at Jefferson Rojas' swing, and I'm like, that's a pretty swing.
Dude,
That
it's
his swing
nice.
is for a
It's
right-handed swing,
nice.
especially. Like a lot of times you're like, oh, like Moises Ballesteros, great lefty swing, or like we talked about for years, the Cole Roederer swing was a beautiful lefty swing. A lot of
Yeah.
times you're talking about lefties. Jefferson Rojas has a really pretty righty swing, and so I'm guessing that my eye test of looking at his pretty swing matches up with a lot of those metrics in terms of the way that he moves his body, both at the plate, but also in the field and on the bases a little bit too, So,
Yeah.
yeah, man, yeah, Jefferson Rojas, like you mentioned, just this past week, promoted up to AA as a 20 year old, like well deserved because he tore it up, at the high A level this year. And so, really excited to see what he does. I mean, he is on, like, if he shows out and if he performs well, despite what scouting metrics like really take off, right? Despite if the contact of the power really takes off to the next like tier, to the next standard
Yeah.
deviation, uh, if he puts up numbers in double A, like that's all I really need to see from a 20-year-old,
No, I'm
for
right there
a
with you.
20-year-old middle infielder,
Dude, if he
So
starts to have success at AA this year, I'm like, all right, number one on my list. Like, no
yeah,
doubt about that,
exactly.
just because of the age.
All right, man. Let's get into tier 2 here, which is starting with number 6 at Jonathan Long. I've got Brandon Birdsell at 7. I've got 8 is James Triantos, 9 Christian Hernandez, 10 Christian Franklin, and 11 is Will Sanders.
To me,
Again,
this is a more interesting tier than tier one.
yeah, I mean, this is where it gets kind of interesting, right? I think that
Yeah.
like at like 1 through 5 makes total sense. Like I think like those are if you're not including one of those, like those should be your top 5 guys in my
Yeah.
opinion. Starting at 12 and beyond, it's like, all right, pick your favorites. I mentioned this in the article. Like pick your favorites and just roll with those. But like 6 through 11 here, Jonathan Long through Will Sanders. Like I define this tier as successful development means back end starters, impact or bulk relievers, and bench bats. Like I'm not expecting any of these guys. Like if Jonathan Long takes off and is a major league starter, then that is like beyond what I expect from him. Like that's awesome. Are there any players here that you wanna hit me with?
Well, I want to hit you with all of them, to
Yeah,
be quite honest with you.
yeah,
Jonathan Long has stood out since spring training. We saw some people who just at first glance, I think, oh, that looks like KB's former swing.
big time.
Uh, you have Brandon Birdsell. You talk about extreme traits. That extension pops out. I'm looking at Brandon Birdsell. I'm like, he looks like he's throwing like a short arm type
Yeah.
situation over here, right? You look at James Triantos. He's been on our list for years. He's been
Hmm.
compared to Nico Horner at times. Christian Hernandez, talk about international guys. He was the creme de la creme many years ago, and now he's emerging as maybe a prospect who deserves to be talked about. Christian Franklin early on this year had the high exit velo, had the discipline. We're thinking, oh my God, is he going to emerge, right? So there's all these different fascinating narratives behind each guy. I think for me, the most impactful at this stage of the Cubs competitive window at the big league level would be Brandon Birdsell. Because if he's going to show that he's healthy and he shows the same type of stuff he showed last year, well, he becomes immediate pitching depth this season where he
Hmm.
can get called up and maybe give you, I'm just asking for 5 innings, 10
Yeah.
innings, just to expand the Cubs pitching depth.
Yeah. So Birdsell came up and completed his rehab from injury and made his first start of the year in Iowa this past week.
How do you look?
And just super, super, super exciting to see him back. Is like now like you mentioned, he's back to being major league depth in
Yeah.
the rotation or bullpen or wherever you need him. But he kind of looked exactly like we've seen from the past few years. He featured that pitch mix that is well, the thing that stood out the most to me, I think, was so he ended up going. I think he went 2 innings, um, the second inning of work. The first inning, I thought the cutter looked like the best pitch that he had in that first inning, but he didn't throw it very much. He came out the second inning and threw just a ton. I think it was 28 of the 32 pitches he threw in the second inning were all cutters. And I want to put a little asterisk on that because
Yeah,
what
what's
he
up with that?
showed, well, so what we got accustomed to seeing the past couple of years from Brandon Birdsell, especially last year when he was Cubs minor league pitcher of the year, was that he kind of works on this like spectrum, on the sliding scale of pitches, where he's got the four-seam fastball, like the traditional four-seam fastball. He's got the cut ride fastball. He's got the traditional cutter. He's got a slider. He's got something in between the cutter and slider. Then he's got the curveball, and he's got something in between the slider and curveball. It's a sliding scale. It's a spectrum. And like typically when you're looking at that, you're saying, oh, a pitcher needs to define what pitches he's throwing. Like he needs to really separate out the curveball from the slider and really needs to separate out the slider from the cutter. But I think that what he's doing is intentional as opposed to like we talk about like pitches that bleed into each other, and that's an unintentional phrase, right?
Mhm.
Like they're bleeding into each other. I think what he's doing is intentional and kind of manipulating the baseball in a way dependent on what side of the plate that he's facing, depending on the count, depending on the type of play of hitter that he's facing, and I think that he does that really really well. So I think that like Statcast has a really tough time defining what pitches he's throwing. I think so. Like I think they were all cutters technically, but I think some of them were cutters at 87, which morphed more into the slider mix. But I think some of them were cutters at like 91, which morphed more into like the cut right fastball, right? So like I think it's a sliding scale, and I think he's really really good at that. And so, man, I'm still really impressed with Brandon Birdsell. I'm with you. I think he could potentially log some 5 or 10 innings at the end of the season at the major league level.
Velocity for the fastball, was it
It was I think right around 94, give or
okay?
take
So he
a
was
mile or two.
95 last year. So was
Yeah.
it lower then? Is it fair to
It
say
it
it
was
was
it was a
lower?
little bit lower. It was a little bit lower, but I'm not too concerned about that
The
at this point.
standout trait for Birdsell last year was the command. I remember
Yes.
seeing his zone profiles, and he was just darting everything like exceptionally well. Uh, so even though this stuff, while intriguing, may not play up to the standards of a top prospect like Kate Horton or Jackson Wiggins, the ability to manipulate, as you
Mhm.
said, and bleed into several different pitch types, the four-seam fastball with that cut ride profile, the sharp slider cutter, whatever you want to discuss or call that, the curveball that's more north to south, and then the changeup at times, like 2 to 5% at times, is intriguing. I'm curious, when you were watching him, did that command look like it was last year?
It was kind of I don't think it was like it was last year. He ended up
But it was only
walking
his
4
first start,
guys.
right?
Yeah, it was his first start back in Iowa. He walked 4 guys, but it wasn't like he was all over the place. Like, they were some real small miss walks. Like, he had I think it was 2 different walks that were 4-pitch walks, all 4 pitches, like, right around the zone. So, like, they were small miss walks, nothing I'm too awful worried about at this point, especially coming back from injury. Like, nothing stood out as, like, particularly concerning about Brandon Birdsell in his outing at Iowa or his outings that he had in South Bend. I came away really impressed for him to bounce back in the way that he did that quickly, I guess.
Yeah. I know we have 20 minutes left. So I know you have a ton of
Yeah.
names to get to. Briefly, James Triantos, what's going on? I mean, the offense is
Yeah.
down.
So the offense is down this year. That's a little bit concerning. But I think part of the reason why I've dropped him down to 8 here, and he's been right around this general area in past iterations of this list, but obviously some graduations, and he's still staying down this low. The way that I view James Triantos is that I think he'd be a really like he's a bench bat plus, right? So like he's started the bench bat profile of like John Birdie or Vidal Brujan or whatever, but James
Great
Triantos has the
comparisons.
ability to James Triantos has the ability to play center field and infield, so he'll get a few extra at bats that way.
How is
He
he in the outfield?
um he he looks fine in center field. I think
Yeah,
he's played center. He doesn't stand out as being exceptional, but I also haven't
but
seen a
he's
ton
competent.
of work
Yeah.
from out there. Yeah. So start with the number of at bats a traditional bench guy gets. Add some more at bats because he's got the flexibility to play both infield and outfield. Add a few more at bats because he's a really good as far as like bat to ball skills. And that is really important when you've got a pinch hitter. So he'll get some more pinch hit opportunities, late game pinch hit opportunities because he'll put bat on ball in the way that Nico Horner does, maybe not that to that extreme. So then add some more at bats because of that. Then you throw in the fact that he's a really good base runner. He can steal you quite a few bags. And so like he's a pinch runner late in games. He'll probably stick around in the field and then get more at bats that way as well. And so like you're a bench bat plus. I've talked in the past, like comparing him to like kind of a poor man's Nico Horner. I think that still holds true. Like we're talking about Nico Horner and how valuable he is, but then take away that defense, right? Take away the defense from Nico Horner, and I think you've got something similar there with James Triantos. And so if we're talking value, I'm just kind of hedging a little bit and keeping him down here at 8 because I think he profiles more as a bench bat on a contender versus maybe a starter on a bad non-playoff team.
Christian Franklin started the year off really noticeable in some of those extreme athletic traits, if you will, the exit velo, everything, the discipline. The age, though, 25 years old, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Long, he's also 25, right?
I believe he's 25 now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
The mid 20s, whatever it is. When you see guys have success at AAA at that age, does the age dampen your enthusiasm at all?
No, not for those guys at AAA. I think that both Jonathan Long and Christian Franklin are guys that have kind of progressed in a traditional development pattern, right?
Okay.
It's not like either of those guys were really bad and all of a sudden it took 4 years for them in AAA and then they figured it out. Both those guys have progressed in a normal way. Both Jonathan Long and Christian Franklin are getting their first taste of AAA and have had success in their first taste of AAA. Johnny Long, I have him down at 6 in that second tier because, again, I view him as a first base only prospect. The Cubs have not shown their faith in him to play third base or left field, which I was really hoping they would. All right, like especially with Matt Shaw back up to the majors, like I was really hoping that they give more run to Jonathan Long at third base or left field, and I think he's played
Which
6 games at third base and like 4 games in left field, and like
that
that's
speaks
not enough.
volume to what they think of his defense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so at some point you have to trust what the Cubs
Yeah.
organization is showing you as opposed to how much you believe in him. And so I think he's a great hitter. But I think I said in the write-up, right? Like he either needs to show that he can play third base or left field or show that he can be a 25 to 30 home run player in the major leagues. And like that over the fence power just isn't quite showing itself.
Yeah.
With Christian Franklin, he's a fourth outfielder, dude. Like he is a fourth outfielder. He can play all 3 defensive positions in the outfield. Great plate approach. The power's come around to a certain degree. He's just not hitting the ball in the air quite enough, right? And so, yeah, I think he's that fourth outfield profile, and I really like both these guys quite a bit.
Okay, let's go to the third tier. I'm
Yeah.
gonna move you along over here, right? So just
Yeah,
for
love it.
the sake of time. Ryan Gallagher, AA, right? I think he
Just got
AA.
called up to AA. Makes his debut in AA. We're recording this on Sunday. He makes his debut today.
Makes it look at that,
Yeah.
perfect time. And talk to me, Ryan Gallagher. What am I looking for? I've never seen him pitch, but I am curious about his trajectory.
Yeah, so real quick, I'm defining this third tier as successful development means their major league depth or like one really strong major league season, right? And I think Ryan Gallagher being at 12, being the first guy in that tier 3 makes sense given I think that like he has the strongest likelihood to jump up into that second tier as being like a nice back end starter at the major league level. He's getting a lot of swings and misses, and that's what I look for most. Like I when I'm looking at pitchers, like you talked about the contact rate for hitters
Yeah.
and how that translates really well as they climb the ladder. Swing and miss stuff, the ability to generate whiffs is like the one thing I look at the most for pitchers. And Ryan Gallagher does that. He's got a fastball that is more low 90s, but he's got some serious ride to it. He's getting some whiffs on the top end of the zone. He's got the slider. He's got the changeup. I think he has a really nice pitch mix. I'm excited to see him do it at AA. Like that's going to be really, really important to me. I don't think that Ryan Gallagher is Jackson Wiggins or Cade Horton, but I think that he could be Brandon Birdsell, and so I think that's
Yeah.
important.
Well, he had a 1.98 walk per 9 in A ball, a K per 9 of 10.5. Then the ERA was like 3.7. So
Yeah.
I look at the strikeouts. I'm like, all right, that's really high. I look at the walks, of course, very low. ERA mid 3s. I'm thinking, all right, he's a lot of pitches inside the zone, right? That might leave him susceptible at times, but to have that strikeout rate so high, even with damaging the zone that much, also is encouraging.
Yeah, both these guys Ryan Gallagher at 12 and Nick Dean at 13, which I think I'm the high guy on Nick Dean. They kind of tell the same story, right? They're getting lots of
Yeah,
swings and misses, lots of whiffs, um, leading to a high CSW called strikes and whiffs rates. Um,
I love that.
both guys are guys that are striking out a lot of dudes. They're like 28, 29% strikeout rate, low walk rates, 5, 6, 7, 8% walk rates. But then the ERA is too high. Not too high. It is with Nick Dean. Like Nick Dean's in the fours, Ryan Gallagher's in the high threes. Like that doesn't seem to translate to their ability to strike guys out and and limit the walks. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah,
But
both those
listen,
guys are super exciting.
but it's also encouraging though because they're showing that they can get the whiffs, right?
Yeah.
So if it's just
Yep.
a matter of like, hey, we're gonna fine tune your whether it be sequencing your intent, well, that's great because your underlying stuff suggests you're gonna get whiffs and you're
Hmm.
already hitting the zone with high frequency. So to me,
Yeah.
I don't care about the ERA in that respect.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's kind of why I have them at 12 and 13.
Pedro Ramirez, my guy Pedro Ramirez.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, like, dude, the strikeout rates, and then like he's 21 in Double A, right? And
Yeah,
then
man.
he has like what 7 home runs, something like that, and I
Yeah.
think 350 plate appearances. To me, that's interesting. I think he's always been an interesting guy just because he has some of the contact and defensive profile.
The Pedro Ramirez has been the guy that most confuses me over the past like 5 years, right?
Okay.
There's such a big disconnect between like what I'm watching on the field in terms of like how he projects long term and the stats that he's putting up as a 21-year-old in Double A. Like they just
Yeah,
don't really match up. I
he
think part of
doesn't look
that
like it.
he doesn't look like it. I just don't. I don't think that the defense is super strong out at second base or third base. He's not walking a ton, and that's going to be like it.
Don't the
He's gonna.
coaches love him too? Was I
Coaches love him.
okay?
Every coach I talked to, every scout I talked to was like, oh, like Pedro Ramirez is the absolute best. And like I don't like I love watching him play. I just don't see a starter in the major leagues from Pedro Ramirez. And so I think he makes sense as major league depth. I could see him coming up to a team and having a real strong one season. But he is the most confusing prospect I've ranked over the past 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, he seems like one of those guys that he would be thrown in as like a mid-tier prospect in a trade
100%.
package, right?
Yep.
So take that for what you will.
Yeah.
What else? What else you got here? You got all these guys in the second tier. You
Yeah.
got
So this third tier, I'm glad that we pointed out those pitchers at the top: Ryan Gallagher, Nick Dean, and Grant Kipp. Like all three of those dudes, I'm excited to see continue to develop as they climb the ladder up to Double A and then Triple A. See who separates themselves among that group. Ariane Rodriguez is someone that Brendan King, broadcaster for the South Bend Cubs, came on and raved about. I'm
he's
excited to see
awesome by
more
the
of
way.
him. Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, he's cool.
Eli Lovich is the guy to watch here. I
Okay.
think from this group. Eli Lovich at 17, and even Angel Cepeda at number 19. Both those guys are teenagers playing in Myrtle Beach right now, where it's really hard to hit. The numbers for either guy are not super pretty, but both of them are really good athletes. I think Angel Cepeda playing there all season has not looked overmatched despite the numbers. And Eli Lovich came up a little bit later in the season, but looks the part. Like you watch him move, you watch him the way he works at bats. Like I really like Eli Lovich quite a bit. I think that I mentioned in the article, like I think that Lovich is following in the footsteps of Owen Caissie. Maybe not the number one prospect in 3 years. I'm not saying that from Eli Lovich, but like the same kind of blueprint that Owen Caissie followed. I think that Eli Lovich can do that same thing.
So Eli Lovich, big guy, 6'4".
Yeah,
Fangraphs has him at 185.
and
Does he
plenty of room
have?
to put on weight. Yeah,
Does he have? Like when you watch Owen Caissie, you can see just the raw power capacity. Do you see that with Eli as well?
yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe not to that extreme. I know he's
Yeah,
hitting the ball really hard. The exit velos for Eli Lovich are terrific. Now, top 20 in all of the world in terms of exit velos, like what Owen Caissie has, like probably not that from Eli Lovich, but
right.
hoping that I'm a little worried. Like I think he's a corner outfielder, not a center fielder. Is Eli
Okay,
Lovich, and so like I've seen a lot of like Christian Yelich comps in terms of the way his body moves, and like I
okay.
can see that a little bit, but I think that like while Christian Yelich is still at the major league level, a tall, lanky dude that is like a really good athlete, even into his 30s, I don't see that as much with Eli Lovich. I think that it's a not quite as athletic Christian Yelich or Owen Caissie template.
JP Wheat, 100 mile per hour fastball. Injuries, but
Yeah,
what's going on there?
I had him closer to the top of this tier. I had him closer to 12,
Right.
13, 14. I've ended up publishing this with him at 18 is JP Wheat, and part of that is because he got put on the 60-day IL.
What
He's been out
happened?
for quite some time. I'm not sure. I've been doing some digging. I can't tell what actually. He initially went on the IL because of a finger injury, but I don't know that this is part of that. It might be something different here with JP Wheat. So that concerns me a little bit with the injury, but a dude that touches triple digits. And we talk about Nazir Muley in his velos. He's ranked 23, but JP Wheat is a guy that throws even harder than Muley does and has a really good slider too.
Hmm.
So I'm hoping he comes back healthy because he can fly up this list. Really hoping that JP Wheat is not included in trades because if he is,
Hmm.
I think he can really take off with other teams.
Also injuries. Cole Mathis. You described him as a second round pedigree. So I see second round pedigree ranked number 20th on here, and it does
Yeah.
pique my interest.
Yeah, if I'm confused by Pedro Ramirez, I'm really confused by Cole Mathis. It's he's coming back from Tommy John surgery, and then he came
Yeah.
and played some games in Myrtle Beach. Didn't look real strong doing so. He's been out for quite some time now at this point. I know we got a question in my mentions leading into this episode about Cole Mathis. I'm just not quite sure what's going on with him as far as the injury front goes. But he is the highest ranked or the highest drafted prospect from that 2024 class hanging around because Cam Smith's now gone, So Cole Mathis is that guy. I know that the Cubs front office really believed in Cole Mathis, and so I'm kind of still a year later, still deferring to their judgment a little bit on Cole Mathis. If it was based on what I've seen on the field, I probably rank Cole Mathis outside my top 30 just because there hasn't been that production there and the injury history as well. So I'm deferring to the Cubs front office on this one to a certain degree.
So I'll look at the fourth tier. You can, of course, describe what the fourth tier is to you,
Yeah.
but the name that pops out for me continues to pop out, and that's Riley Martin. I've been hearing about Riley Martin for multiple years now. I'm always seeing that K rate in AAA, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's double digits. When is he going to get his chance to actually contribute to the big league level? Talk to me about Riley Martin, why he's not getting looks, and then why he's in that fourth tier.
Yeah, so I define the fourth tier as there's plenty of things that catch my eye with these guys, but lots has to go right for them to find major league success, right? And so I have the starting at number 21 and really going through 30, but it can go through whatever number you want. If you identify a player as like really catching your eye, you can throw them into this top 30 mix right here. Riley Martin just walks a bunch of dudes, man. Like he just walks a bunch of guys.
His stuff
Besides
looks good
that,
though.
he is great, man. Like the fastball is really strong. Like the fastball has lots of right up in the zone. The curveball is the best curveball in the organization.
Yeah.
He's getting just so many swings and misses, so many strikeouts. Um, it, I'd love to see him get major league run right now.
You
Like
think he gets a
I
shot
think
this year?
I don't know.
When I
There's
say
other
shot, I mean
lefties.
like one inning. Like he throws one major league inning.
I think he probably deserves it. I think that the roster doesn't really help him out, right? There's other
Yeah.
lefties above him on the pecking
Well,
order, and
that
I'm
and you
sure that
just have like an option less current bullpen with the
exactly,
Braziers and the
yeah.
Presleys and so on.
Exactly. So I think the roster is working against him, but I think that like if he wasn't with the Cubs organization right now, like he would be in a major league bullpen. And I am the biggest Riley Martin believer out there. I just think he's so damn good. I think that the walk rate is obviously like pretty astronomical, but like
But the same, I mean, like this, we could probably talk about Riley Martin for
it.
hours here, so I don't want to do that. But same discussion we had with Porter
Yep.
Hodge.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, Porter Hodge's stuff, you can tell me, but Porter Hodge's stuff may have been a little bit more noticeable than Riley Martin because he has the heavy sweep, the fastball. But we had a similar discussion about Porter Hodge's
Yeah.
walk rate this time last year.
Yeah, I think the way we talked about Porter Hodge and Daniel Palencia, you could say that's the case for Riley Martin. I think if he comes up to the majors and really learns how to just like attack the zone with
Yeah,
really good stuff. Now the difference is like I don't think the stuff is like you said. Porter Hodge had like a very clear like special cut right fastball at
yeah,
97 and a sweeper that was one of the best in the game.
yeah.
Versus Riley Martin has a cut right fastball that's not quite as high on the velo range and not quite as cutty righty as Porter Hodge's and then a curveball that doesn't do the same as what a sweeper does at the major league level. But man, I could talk about Riley Martin for days. I have him down here at 26 just because like mostly because he's a reliever, right? Like I'm not gonna rank a reliever who can get you maybe a one WAR season for a few seasons in the top like 10 of this organization. Like, don't let him being down at 26 take away from like my belief in Riley Martin. And the same could be said for Nick Hole, who's a reliever now, right? Nick Hole is another reliever that I really, really believe in. Really good at getting swings and misses as well. So relievers, it's just tough to rank relievers above like 20 on a top prospect rankings.
Connor Nolan, he's had experience. He's an older guy. You described him as AAA tested reliever. What do you got on Connor Nolan?
Yeah.
What's the likelihood we see him at Wrigley in the next, let's say, year and a half?
Yeah, I think that Connor Nolan. I mean, happy birthday to Connor Nolan today as we
Oh,
record
look at
this.
that.
Yeah, good segue here. Uh, yeah, I think the stuff is good. And he gets results. I think he's a good AAA pitcher. I think he's a really good AAA pitcher. For him to get some run back and forth between Chicago and Iowa, he's going to need to up the stuff just a little bit across the board. Like the fastball needs to gain a little bit more velo. The slider needs to gain a little bit more bite. The changeup needs to gain a little bit more, fall off the table a little bit more. Like everything just needs to be improved just a little bit, right? In order for Connor Nolan to be that guy. But until then, like he does act as major league depth when you're a starting pitcher in the Iowa rotation.
Of this fourth tier, you have a lot of names here. You have Owen Ayers. You just talked about
Mm-hmm.
Nick Cole. You have Jose Escobar. You got Tyler Schlafer, Ethan Flanagan. Of those guys, which has the greatest variation in both directions, where you can see them just trampolining up, let's say, to the second tier, or you could see,
Yeah.
there's some problems here which then take them away from your top 30.
Yeah, Nazir Muley at 23 is that guy, right? Like he's the youngest guy of this bunch by quite a bit, I think, actually. I guess Jose Escobar is pretty young too, but Nazir
What is he, like
Muley,
18 years old, 19? How old is he?
Muley's 20, I think, right now,
Oh, he's 20.
this
Okay.
year, and so he's playing down in Myrtle Beach. Yeah, he could be a guy that jumps up into the second tier. He has really really good stuff, but he could be a guy that honestly, like truly, um, can't succeed at the high A level if he gets promoted. It's just the stuff, the velo and the slider are both really strong, but right now my problem with
Is
him
it a
last year
sweepy
was
slider? What kind of slider is it? Is it a
yeah, it's more
tight
of a sweepy
slider?
slider from
Yeah.
Ulay. Last year, my problem with him was that he wasn't getting enough swings and misses. This year, he's
Mhm.
doing that, which is terrific. He's logging more innings, he's logging more pitches per game, all that good stuff. Really strong, but now he's walking way too many guys, and so
Okay.
he's got to find that balance of all of that. I think the stuff is terrific for him to be a tier two type guy, like a top 10 prospect in the Cubs organization. But on the other end, like he can really drop down and just not make it much out of the lower levels of the minors. Before we wrap up, I want to call out a few guys here that like I really like in terms of whether it's on field production or like maybe not necessarily a starting player at the major league level, right? In this tier four, but Carter Trice at 21 has been so fun this year. I think his combination of speed, power, and like defensive flexibility is amazing. It's the contact rate that really concerns me the most with Carter Trice, and so we'll keep an eye on that as he climbs the ladder. I've got Owen Ayers ranked at number 27. He stands out because of his like extreme athleticism. What stands out to me
But
with
he's
Owen
older,
Ayers,
right?
he's an older guy at Myrtle Beach. I'm less concerned about age with catchers, right? Like catchers are
Mhm.
kind of their own weird thing that
Species.
age doesn't matter, I guess, like to a certain
Yeah.
degree, you know?
I mean, look at
I
Barry Bonds. I mean, Carson Kelly. Whoops.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, with Owen Ayers, like I describe him as defensively, he reminds me a lot of Bryce Wyndham with that athleticism behind the plate, which we were very familiar with Bryce Wyndham as a prospect. And then at the plate, there's a little bit of like Jared Young in him, former
Oh,
Cubs
cool.
prospect Jared
Yeah,
Young,
yeah,
who's gotten plenty of major league run
yeah.
uh, in his ability to kind of work gap to gap with
Also a
hitting a
pretty
lot of
swing too,
doubles.
Jared Young.
Also very pretty swing.
Yeah.
So Ayers stands out. And then the last guy I want to call out here is number 29, Tyler Schlafer, who has really just jumped on the radars. We've talked about him quite a bit on the show, but his ability over the past, or his results from June on, now in Double A, still getting results like were enough to take him from a guy ranked right around the 50 slot in the organization to a guy ranked 29th on my list here. I think it's a legit breakout from Tyler Schlafer
Love that.
now years into his tenure in the Cubs organization. So gonna have a really interesting case with Tyler Schlafer coming up in the next few months or so. Do they push him up to even AAA because he's a minor league free agent after this year? Do they want to keep him? Can they add him to the 40-man roster? That seems like a stretch at this point.
Yeah.
But how do they approach Tyler Schlafer? Where does he go from here? Because I do think the breakout is legit from him.
Okay. So we're at the hour mark. I do want to just go back up a little bit more bird's eye view level. The
Yeah.
Cubs system as a whole, we've graduated Horton, we've graduated Shaw, and we've graduated, of course, MVP, right? Where does this Cubs system currently rank in your like ideal expectations? If you're talking to a Cubs fan who sees these graduations and they're asking, well, is the system still in a good position, right? How would you describe that?
I think that right now the depth is just not there.
Well, is
The
that natural? That's the question I'm kind of
I
leaning
think so.
towards.
I think so. I think that we're looking at an organization ranked what, like 20 to 25 in all of
That's what
baseball
I
right now.
saw. Yeah.
And I think that that makes sense. And when you expect that as the major league team gets better, right now that first tier of the top five guys, Casey, Ballesteros, Rojas, Wiggins, Alcantara, are really good as a top tier in the organization. That second tier is of number 6 through 11. Like, I don't really see any top 100 prospects in that grouping. And so you're going to have to replace some of those top tier guys, to replace Owen Caissie and Moises Ballesteros as they graduate. You're going to have some like serious breakouts, like young, like not like late in the game, not Tyler Schlafer type breakouts. Like, you're going to have to see like Angel Cepeda like really breaking out in a huge way, or Eli Lovich breaking out in a huge way. And that's a big ask for some of those guys. And so obviously Ethan Conrad jumps in here, and I think he's a first tier type of
You
prospect.
said he's like right now between like 5 and 8.
Yeah, I
If
think
he were to
comparing him to Kevin
slot
Alcantara
games.
makes sense. I think
Okay.
like that's the right range for Ethan Conrad. But like, I'm a little worried, right? I'm a little worried about the state of the organization in a year and a half from now, a year from now. So we'll see.
Jefferson Rojas has gone through the rankings, right? When he
Yeah.
was first brought into the Cubs organization, was he on your radar? Was he like an
Not
obvious
in
guy?
this way. Not in this way. I think that like Jefferson Rojas has kind of been everything that we hoped Christian Hernandez would be when the
Yeah.
Cubs signed him. And that's not to like tear down Christian Hernandez, because I still have him ranked ninth, right?
I
And
mean,
I
he's
think
back in
like,
relevancy.
yeah, he's back in relevancy. So like that's
Yeah.
not a knock on Christian Hernandez. It's just like a how good has Jefferson Rojas been? Well, like we had insane expectations for Christian Hernandez entering his time in the Cubs organization, and
That's true.
Jefferson Rojas has been that guy. Like, he has been that guy. So
So
um,
how can like is there potential where the Cubs can have those Jefferson Rojas's start to come up then?
yeah, I think they're gonna have to get better about signing
Yeah.
free agents and international free
So is it
agency.
more like the international free agency they have to improve upon?
Yes,
Okay,
I'm a little worried about that.
is that like a dig on the system? They're not identifying those international guys?
I'd say so. Yeah,
Okay.
that's actually one of my bigger concerns about
Okay.
the Cubs organization as a whole, is that
So so
ability to
there's
identify
are they
IFAs.
better at the draft
Yeah.
then than the
Oh, they're great at the draft. Yeah, they figured the draft out. You just keep Dan Kantrovitz around, you're good.
All right, well, let's figure out the international stuff.
Exactly. Send Dan Kantrovitz to start doing that as well.
Okay.
All right, man. I've got to go on
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
note, but I will give you a chance. You've got a new podcast in
I do.
addition to your work you're doing with Corey. You want to plug yourself a little bit?
Sure. New Cubs podcast on Tuesday. Cubs on Tuesday. Just 20 minutes, 16-second long podcast. Just breaking down very, very briefly updates on the previous week, like leaderboards. And then it's just a mailbag fan type question podcast where I'll throw out some questions and I'll center 15 minutes of the 20-minute episode on what you guys think are the most pressing questions. So it's only going to be for about 2.5 months. We'll see if I continue this throughout the offseason, but I just want to see, right now the Cubs are hot. I want to talk more about the Cubs, and I'm using this Tuesday space as a mechanism to do that.
It's perfect. That 20 minutes, 16 seconds, while wildly appropriate for being 2016,
Yeah, I
is
wonder
also
why.
like, it's also a really, yeah, something special happened in
I don't know.
2016.
Something about a World Series, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's also like that 20-minute time frame is like perfect for like just getting a little fix of like taking the knowledge out of your brain for 20 minutes is perfect. Like, it's
Yeah.
great.
And it's like a morning commute type thing. So,
Exactly. It's
that's
perfect.
that's my commute time at least.
All right, guys. You can check out the podcast here on YouTube. Leave a comment, give us a like below. Let us know like where did I screw up? Where would you have a prospect ranked higher or lower? Who did I miss? All that good stuff. Check us out on all the podcasting platforms. We really appreciate you tuning in the way you did last week. Last week's episode got a lot of listens, a lot of views, and we knew that would be the case because a lot of people are interested in the draft. Hopefully, you stuck around to learn a little bit more about the top 30 prospects in the Cubs organization. thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back in your ears in probably about a week, maybe a little bit longer, so we can be there for the trade deadline recap episode. Thanks, guys.